incubators like UACI exist to fuel the innovation ecosystem, connecting founders with people and programming they need to move ideas from discovery to delivery. But as anyone knows who's funded or advises startups, that journey is often brutal. In our first pit stop, we talked about the target product profile, defining what the product must be. Today, we move from definition to execution. I call this safe passage across the valley of death. So last time I shared the twin engines of healthcare innovation and focused on the first engine, the one on the left, designing for value. We emphasized the importance of value verification, doing your homework to identify real-world problems and solutions worth paying for. But to deliver that value, we must examine the other engine, designing out risk, the one on the right. Together, these two pillars form an earned value scorecard, a real-time measure of the investor value you have created. If you're an investor, a board member, or a founder, you know the valley of death all too well. It's the graveyard of good science that never made it to market at scale. It can be useful to think of an entrepreneur's roadmap as the journey across that value, or across that valley, but most people think of a roadmap as a project plan, and it's not. A project plan tells you how and when tasks are coordinated. A product roadmap is a strategic document. Like the TPP, it's a risk management system, or if you will, an investor confidence support system. Let's start with the hard truth. Startups rarely die because they run out of ideas, or because the market didn't exist. They die because they run out of trust. Innovation finance is governed by a specific law of investor physics. Failure occurs when confidence decays faster than earned value is created. So think about the anatomy of belief. Risk is the presence of uncertainty. We expect that. Risk is necessary. But confidence is fragile. In the early days, confidence is cheap. It's driven by your story, your vision, and the peak hype you create. But as you execute, reality sets in. Diligence happens. If your execution reveals unexpected flaws faster than you can prove your value, you hit what I call the confidence cliff. The gap between belief and reality gets too wide, and capital is destroyed. Investors need proof, not just promise. Here's one quick example. Grail's Galleri multi-cancer early detection test is real science, but billions were committed before the value equation caught up. Technical feasibility of their MSED test outpaced the work needed for clinical adoption, health economics, and reimbursement. Confidence decayed faster than earned value was created. That's the math on this slide. Now, principle 2 is a bridge to nowhere. You can execute a roadmap perfectly. You can hit every technical milestone, burn through every dollar of seed capital, and still fail. This happens when a team builds a bridge to nowhere. A bridge to nowhere is a product that is mature in technology terms. Department of Defense calls it Technology Readiness, or TRL, level 8, or 7 to 8 or 9. It's a fully functioning product or system, but it has zero validated value. Remember engine number 1, designed for value? You made progress on the timeline, but you never moved up in value. You built a robust, flawless solution to a problem nobody cares about. If you're funding companies based purely on technical milestones, you may be on a bridge to nowhere. Now, I know that principle 3 is provocative, but the old way of road mapping is a trap. The traditional Gantt chart tracks activity, busyness, not readiness. It focuses on exact features and precise launch dates, but by doing so, it forces early stage founders to lie. It forces them to put a specific delivery date on a scientific discovery that hasn't happened yet. Sometimes these dates are genuinely unknowable, unretired risk, unexpected system interdependencies, and more. Teams focus on getting things done to trumpet productivity, but this could become a long march of serial setbacks, each followed by the discovery of the next. Or worse yet, to dismiss challenging user requirements and claim they will fix it after launch, creating technical debt debt that drains commercial momentum and cash. What happens next? Well, the team adds buffer time. They pad their estimates. They explain, then they over-explain, deep in the weeds. And when they inevitably miss that key milestone, the CEO and the investors feel surprised. Surprise destroys trust. Late disclosure feels like deception. Once confidence evaporates, it's hard to gain it back. So what should we do instead? The Earned Value Scorecard. A roadmap is not a schedule of deliveries. Like the TPP, it is a decision system. We have to replace the calendar with an XY coordinate system showing where we are on the map. The y-axis is value verification, design thinking. Are we solving a real customer problem? The x-axis is risk reduction, technical maturity. To measure it, we often use the DoD's TRLs, as I mentioned, TRL 1 through 9, from scientific principles to real-world success at scale. Earned value then becomes a forcing function in road mapping, governing a responsible, risk-adjusted value creation timeline. Early progress can be accelerated by riskiest assumption testing, sometimes known as killer questions. They accelerate the discovery of truths which, by definition, can be showstoppers. Showstoppers for value creation and for risk retirement. The cardinal rule of the Navigator: never let your technology readiness spend outrun your value verification. And shift from asking, when will it be done, to, is it worth doing? So what should progress look like on this earned value scorecard? The goal for any board or founder is a diagonal trajectory, up and to the right. Every step forward in technical maturity, every dollar spent engineering a physical asset, must be earned by a corresponding step upward in verified value. How? Through customer discovery. Some call it design thinking or problem research, to uncover, study, and measure real-world problems worth solving. We move from measuring performance to measuring consequence. This converts busyness into investable reality. And earned value pairs the maturation of technology with a validated customer need. Each diagonal step protects capital by preventing those late-stage confidence cliffs. Now, most roadmaps assume perfect execution, zero design risk, one-shot validation. It's like success theater. They assume every project will work perfectly. In contrast, a Navigator's roadmap explicitly identifies off-ramps, go, no-go milestones, to ensure technical and value spending stay tightly linked, and we use them with discipline and integrity. If value isn't verified, to support the next phase, the spending stops. If rigorous feasibility criteria are not met, the gate to development must remain firmly closed. The project never moves to the expensive now column. Stopping ideas that can't pass riskiest assumption testing isn't a failure. It's the ultimate proof of fiduciary responsibility. And the investor North Star is not fewer failures. The goal is really earlier truth and at lower cost. Force the truth early, and you preserve optionality to pivot your approach and keep going, or to pack it in and redirect your capital. And to enforce this, we need the anti-Gantt version of road mapping. Move away from rigid timelines and adopt broad time horizons. Now, next, later. Together, they might cover 5 or more years of progressive product releases. Now is for execution. These are well understood problems with defined solutions. Technology readiness levels 7 to 9. We can commit to dates because the discovery is done. Next is for validation, TRL 4 to 6. We know the problem, but we're still experimenting to find the solution. We can commit to goals here, not dates. Later is the vision, TRL 1 to 3. We commit to the direction, and we keep our options open. This framework protects founder integrity. It replaces certainty with calibrated transparency when the science gets hard. Now, every investor, every sales rep, every early adopter will want everything right away. That roadmap is easy to draft in PowerPoint, but ultimately it's designed to fail. The Navigator's Agile Roadmap allows you to say yes. You can ask for everything you want, just not all at the same time. Put that good idea in the later bucket. This is the discipline of Agile focus. By ruthlessly limiting the now column to what can be proven to drive value, you optimize for speed. This value now provides a solid foundation for technology maturation, delivering right first-time quality on the things your customers will actually pay for. It's time to stop funding pet projects or speculation that don't align with the strategy. Now, scalable startups don't build one-off snowflake products. They need a pipeline of products that scale efficiently. After all, a pipeline of snowflake products will eat manufacturing alive, and they'll create a nightmare for profitability, for compliance, and for customer support. Instead, build robust multi-product technology foundations, transition from building something that works well to something that scales well. This lever is called the platform dividend. Think systems, an interoperable, integrated, expandable architecture within which many products can be delivered efficiently. We use integration readiness levels, a parallel to technology readiness levels, to identify reusable subsystems, mechanical, thermal, fluidics, detection, a future-ready software architecture or AI substack. Mature that platform subsystem once, it pays dividends across the entire future portfolio. You scale far faster than the related manufacturing costs, and you move from building a prototype to building an enterprise. Now, Cephea's Gene Expert might be a textbook platform dividend, one architecture, 30 plus cartridges. They matured the platform once, and it paid compounding returns across the entire portfolio. That's the difference between building a prototype and building an enterprise. Another one that I had experience with was Corning's fiber optic portfolio. Once they had mastered the art of creating fiber optics, short, long, or transatlantic, it turned into hundreds, if not thousands, of SKUs that could be used to build the business. And at the point where I was with them a couple of decades ago, 70% of their revenue came from products that introduced in just the previous 3 years, all on the back of platform technology that could be used to quickly and reliably execute high-quality development projects. One other thing needs to be discussed. Founders are rewarded early for their optimism. They're trained and incentivized to gloss over uncertainty, and with good reason. There's so many questions. But really, you can't grade your own homework. There's almost always a gap between the founder's eye and the investor's eye. The founder looks at a lab bench and boasts about a TRL-6 development-ready system prototype. The investor might look at the same bench with the help of advisors and see a TRL-4 ad hoc breadboard, never tested in the market, not ready for customer use. Now, to bridge the gap, you might think of an independent technical risk assessment, ITRA, independent technical risk assessment. This is standard DoD policy before major funding decisions. And I think it should be standard VC policy too. An independent audit of your coordinates prevents the late, expensive pivots that can kill startups. Now, how serious is this gap? Well, let's think Theranos, where a timely, high-integrity ITRA might have prevented an infamous confidence cliff. That takes me to my last slide. Really to engineering an investable reality. Failure in this industry is rarely just bad luck. It's often bad navigation. Risk capital fails when confidence collapses faster than value is created. If you're an operator, surface your value and risk reality early. Use discipline and diligence to pressure test risky assumptions with fast fail methods. If you're an investor, stop asking for Gantt charts that force founders to lie and start asking for decision logic. What depends on what? How is it all supposed to work? Synchronize your twin engines of value and risk. Validate your coordinates with an independent assessment. Design a culture and processes that help teams earn confidence in the correct order. And if you need help architecting that stewardship, engage a navigator. And with that, I will close it out and see what questions people may have.
Okay. Well, I guess one reaction I have is, there in startup world, um, there's a lot of serendipity, right? You and so there's a lot of unpredictable stuff that goes on, right? So you might have a really, you know, well-developed plan and all that, and maybe you're trying to execute to that plan, but often success comes from, you know, unplanned, unexpected events, a chance meeting with somebody, a connection here. And so how does that fit into this framework?
I mean, listen, innovation and creativity are what we're here for. So there's just no question. I guess the question is, where should those discoveries be happening? And if, in a disciplined pipeline, they separate research from development at a minimum. And the development is for things where they've already de-risked it and they know what they want to make. And the research is basically problem research, value research. So I would just say that it would be ideal to have a lot of those conversations and seeds planted on the research side of thing. And then we could talk about how do you structure a research portfolio. If you're a startup, it's one product and it's kind of do or die. So you have to be looking for the missing pieces, the risky assumption testing, the theory of operations, characterizing performance, looking at potential use cases, talking to KOLs, holding workshops. In other words, stuff as much interaction, collaboration, and co-creation as you can into the research side of it. A lot of people, though, or companies don't properly separate the development space from the research space, and then they end up discovering the theory of operation while they're in development, or even when they're in validation, or even when they're in the marketplace. And I know of at least one system that badly stumbled because a basic principle of engineering had not been solved in research as it went into development. And development had a timeline with a Gantt chart, and they weren't going to depart from that Gantt chart. So they sort of said, like, we're just going to move forward and we'll fix it in the market. All right, that was over $100 million fix by the time it got into the market and faced consequences. So you can move at whatever pace you want, but you may pay the price. And I do think serendipity can be fostered through culture, both on the research side, get out of the building, meet with people, challenge yourself with diverse thinking. And even on the development side, don't work in silos, have cross-functional teams, debate using data in front of your eyeballs. So I think what you said is super important. And I hope that the human enterprise side of it never leaves us, even in spite of AI like the one that I was using for my PowerPoint.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think there's so many axes to this. Starting a company and making it successful. Um, Customer discovery, product market fit is another area where a lot of companies go wrong. It's
Yeah.
something in the mind of the founder that doesn't get adequately tested in terms of its reality in the marketplace. So,
It also depends a little bit on who you listen to. So, my recent job, as you may recall, was leading research and early development for Roche Tissue Diagnostics, next generation systems, assays, machine learning, biomarkers, all of that. So on the research side, we knew that we're not going to know what the world is going to look like 10 years from now, but that's the job, is to lay the foundations. And what we were doing is picking 5 orthogonal dimensions where we felt like we can't afford to come second. Just an example. We can't afford to come second in biomarkers because missing a critical biomarker could kill a franchise, put people onto a competitor platform. We can't afford to come second in AI and deep learning because the information presented by these multiplex slides is far too complex for a pathologist. And at the same time, we need to think about clinical adoption. The doctors will reject anything that doesn't match with either their clinical training or provide easy to use decisionable tools. So that we set up the research, program in that kind of way. And then on the development side, we really have like a very strong gate to get into development. You need to prove that you can withstand the scrutiny of critical review, independent critical review, with whatever it is you're going to introduce. And it's not just on the widget, it's on how does it fit into the overall architecture, what we invested, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in, it's got to fit. So therefore, the technical review becomes a very important aspect to make sure that we don't run into unexpected problems. And then the last thing is just that, again, that mistake in terms of letting something go and saying, hey, maybe it doesn't matter to the customers. So if you look back, it was right there in the requirements document. Here was this thing that was deprecated. We can eliminate it because it would cost a lot of money to characterize performance in real world setting. We don't have that time or money. Well, guess what? The instrument went out, started creating outrage in the customer labs. We explained to them, oh, don't worry about it. It's just cosmetic. And they told us, do you even know what you're talking about? In our business, I could get fired for presenting information to a pathologist that isn't ready for review. So I think there's a lot there that is worth unpacking to really think about, let's say, the trade-off between being too rigid, which we never want to do, and being too loosey-goosey, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. A big company, you can waste a lot of money and spend a lot of time. In a small company, you're just struggling for those scarce resources to try to accomplish.
I think another thing you raised is important, like getting out there and talking to customers, doing the customer discovery is important,
Yeah.
but you have to be careful who you choose as your customer, and sometimes you're working with the bleeding edge or the leading edge. They may not represent mainstream practice. They may be willing to go with solutions that are half-baked or solutions that are too far out ahead of medical practice where maybe you can't get reimbursed. But if you get into the mainstream market, you're going to find that you can't get people to adopt it because they are not early adopters. They're the mainstream. They don't have time to learn and train people and troubleshoot and call for help. So it's really, that's why I love diagnostics. It's really like Formula One. And I think we talked about that. You have to fire on all the cylinders to even have a car that's in the race, let alone win the race.
And it's such a long road to commercialization.
It is. And it's interesting, to get paid increasingly, especially for value payment, CMS and others are saying, well, you need to really prove its impact on downstream outcomes. All right, a drug company can afford to do that. They make billions of dollars off of a product, and they have $1 billion to bring a new one to market. Diagnostics is at a scale, 10 or 100 times less than that, and prospective, studies on patient outcomes, health economics, are very difficult. So we have to find, I think, approximate ways or more efficient ways. And I think we need to work really hard. Look at Exact Sciences, look at a few others who've really kind of mastered that, but it was really a relentless decade-long, march of evidence until nobody could deny that there is, clinical utility in using that technology.
And keeping it funded for that decade is really the most difficult aspect.
That is the gap. Yeah, people write a book, right? I'm sure you know Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm book, right? Which is the whole discussion about the early adopters to maturity, which is a challenge. But sorry, I just popped in. Great conversation, Martin. Do you have other things?
I'm good, thank you.
Jeff, do you have any comments? Want to continue in the conversation?
No. This goes in line kind of what Donald and I were talking about when we met offline.
Oh.
So it's directly related to what we were talking about. So, yeah, I got a good understanding.
Yeah, I really appreciated the presentation, Donald. And in the incubation entrepreneurial world, we try to adopt the TRL level for all sorts of stuff, right? The investor readiness, I now also learned manufacturing readiness, which a lot of our companies don't manufacture while they're in our program. So I was like, yeah, of course that makes sense because as you just with medical or life science things, when you actually manufacture like other things, right? We have some of our climate companies need to build things, really designing it from the beginning so it can be manufactured and repeated.
Yep.
That's a thing. And, when you're doing your prototyping, you're just wanting to make sure it's this research part, right? You just want to prove it actually can work. And because they don't have this experience, they go right into, of course, we're just going to duplicate that and until they realize, no, it's not. Yeah, you can save a lot of money by just designing it differently. So, and I do think that goes back to, I think we all agree, right? Is this really staying in touch with the customer in the industry, which seems so tedious sometimes because, like you said, you talk to the wrong person, they don't take time, and then things change and you have to do it again and again. And so it's almost like, not almost, but I'm a big believer to kind of always be on the pulse of what's going on and just really staying in the industry, which of course takes time and effort. And when you're a one-man shop or you have limited resources, it just seems so extra. But in the end, I'm a big believer that's the core. If you don't know what the market wants, the value, then building something may just be challenging. Of course, I'm more of the one I don't want to finish my build because I'm like, well, it always has to change. So I'm not a good one for that one. But that's why I'm in the early stages, right, with you guys. But at some point, you do need to finish a product and get it out there and then reevaluate. But any other comments? I know, Susan, you and I, we often talk about the value proposition, and at all the different levels. I don't know if you have
We
comments.
do, and we also often talk about the need to constantly be doing research and to start with a thorough understanding, what you think is a thorough understanding, at least for that moment in time, but
Hmm.
to always be looking ahead and around the corners and to never consider your research to be finished because the market changes, people change,
Hmm.
competition changes, and it's just an ongoing process from which you learn a lot. And
Yeah.
to me, it's the fascinating part. So,
Me too. That's why I'm like, I'll just throw out stuff and see how it reacts. But, when I hear you 10 years, I was like, I don't even know how you do that because that seems like an eternity to me. Like, how do you predict or, even attempt to kind of guess that? But, that goes back to having resources, having, this deeper knowledge within the company.
Mhm. And I think, I mean, you have to kind of set a direction based on your company's identity or sort of your
Hmm.
mission. There's some things you're never going to be doing, and so it's of no importance to you to be researching that. But other
Hmm.
areas, again, if you think about tissue diagnostics, I mean, the action is really in companion diagnostics and predicting the outcome of very expensive cancer therapies, many of which are paid, either by private insurance or out of pocket. So it's a very big deal. So definitely, we need to be out there. We need to really be engaged on a continuing basis and think about at least directionally where is the future of predicting therapeutic success going to go, and how much is it going to rely on looking at patterns in tissue, which I think, fortunately for Roche, there's no end in sight in terms of that. Liquid biopsy does a certain job, but in terms of looking at the landscape of the tumor in its natural context, it's a different set of biomarkers. It's a different set of considerations.
Well, and that's another important point, right? Which we see sometimes or quite frequently with our early innovators where they feel like they want to, because they can't, it's a little overwhelming, so they just want to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And we always, no, like focus, focus, focus. But then they're so worried that if they focus, it's the wrong focus, right? So they always want to like be more spread out. So definitely, this is not a one and done. This is why we know about Facebook and all them because it happens just ever so often. No, it's not an everyday occurrence that people get it right, but there are definitely frameworks and methods, which again, I really appreciate you going through that to kind of really hone in and get to more certainty. I really like that approach that you said because, of course, we have the roadmap, so we have people, filling that in, and there's a lot of different tools and thought processes that I always feel, especially for researchers and technologists, they should be adopting them and should be happy with them because it does eliminate some of the risk as you're moving along. So,
I've been doing a bit of consulting for one startup in the Phoenix area, and it's heavily driven by co-founder and the board. And I would just say that the rest of the organization, including the CLIA lab, is struggling to keep up because they keep changing their mind and kind of moving the goalposts, and it's very, very difficult. So I think one of the things that these tools do is have artifact-driven conversations rather than hallway or power-driven conversations. And I really prefer to use workshops to surface the stuff and put it together, but then create some document of record. And the TPP and roadmaps are not the only ones, but they're reasonable examples of what you can do. That reference back, hey, as a matter of fact, you are talking about something that is not on the roadmap. Let me put that in the parking lot, which is in the later category. And if you feel that it's a big, big deal, let's have a due diligence where we examine, whether it can or should substitute for something we're working on right now. So, I mean, I love playing the game because if you have the rules set up, you have a better chance of success. If you're making up the rules as you go, it's very rare that you're going to be happy with the outcome.
Yeah, we just went through an exercise, and it was, for everything that you want to start, you have to stop something. You can't just add stuff. And I feel like with that, actually with my house, every time I bring an item in, another item should get should get out. Otherwise, you just become too overwhelmed. So, but I think we do forget that sometimes, especially when we're excited and, we're trying to figure out, well, how do I get money for this? How do I get people excited? And just really, taking all those bits and pieces in, but back to listen to the ecosystem that you're in, the ecosystem that matters. I also have seen it, especially maybe some of our younger entrepreneurs, they get so much feedback because we do provide a lot of mentoring and coaching and advising and all this stuff. And they're like, well, one says this and one says that. And I'm like, what do I do? And I go back to, well, you're in the driver's seat. You ultimately have to make the decision which direction you want to go. And also, you want to understand what that means going in this one direction or the other. But I also think there's a fine line between, entrepreneurs being very innovative and want to do stuff, and then this structure, right? They sometimes don't want to be in this structure, like, oh, it's too confining. So we always recommend having co-founders, of course, also, and looking for those skill sets that are needed to really balance the team dynamics. So,
And I think here it boils down to like that value side can be driven by people who are highly innovative and curious. We do need the matching side, which is a risk reduction side. And the people who should care about that the most would be probably the CEO, the board, and investors. And so that's what marriage needs to be, is between like creativity on one hand and the likelihood of getting a return on the investment.
exactly. And they have to appreciate each other because then, otherwise it doesn't work out.